chair, the outgoing chair of the program committee for WPB. This is just such an excellent organization, and what a treat you're in for today. I introduced some speakers last night at the Indy Bowls banquet, and I made the comment that I cannot imagine a more relevant time than today. I've been in the financial services business for 25 years, and I cannot imagine a more relevant time for the speech that we have today than our current times. The times, they are changing as you will. Dave Dennis, who is the CEO of Specialty Contractors Inc. In Gulfport, Mississippi, that is a commercial and industrial subcontractor, is here to speak to us today, but he's here to speak to us in his role. He served 3 terms as chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of New Orleans. He was nominated to the board as business representative in 2001, and by 2002, he had wowed the board so much that he was elected chairman and then elected to be chair for 3 subsequent terms. And Dave had also, I think you might be looking, now y'all take note of this, this is just my prediction. I'm in the market, in the business of making predictions and projections, and I think y'all might be looking at a future governor or senator of Mississippi, so y'all keep that in mind. But part of where he has just a prolific record of having, and that would be the culmination of that, he is currently serving as the chairman of Leadership Mississippi on the Mississippi Executive Council, Economic Council's Executive Committee, and on the Knight Foundation Community Board. But before that, he served as chairman of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce, president of the Gulf Coast Economic Council, chairman of the Walter Anderson Museum of Art. He's one of my favorite artists in the world. If y'all ever visit my office now in the city, you'll see his artwork. It's beautiful. State chairman of the BIPAC, which is Business and Industry, chairman of Salute to Business and Industry, the State Regional Chamber Coalition Representative, the president pro tempore of Pro Tem of the Coast Coliseum Commission, and president of St. James School Board. That's not all. We all know that Hurricane Katrina really devastated the past Christian area, and when that came through, both Dave and his wife Jane, who's here, really stepped up to the plate on that. And after that, he was recognized as the Boy Scouts of America's Distinguished Citizens of the Year, and he was named in that post-Hurricane Katrina environment. He served on the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal as chairman of Historical Preservation and of Cultural Preservation and Museums, and other things. I'm not going to go ahead and read the entire thing, but again, he has really stepped up to the plate and helping in rebuild the economic environment in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. We heard a wonderful speech starting off with Jared Stribling about philanthropy and how it means giving not only of money, but giving of yourself and of vision. And a large part of what Dave Dennis has also done is as a family man, and he is really just one of a power couple. And Jane is here today as well, somewhere. Anyway, she's hiding there behind. This lady was just named as the Mississippi Business Journal's Businesswoman of the Year in 2007. And she is a powerhouse in her own right. Last night, I had the very good fortune to sit next to their daughter, Katie, who is also here, who is just in the process of graduating from Ole Miss. And I have to tell you, as a mother of a 9-year-old, also named Kate, the biggest compliment that I can give to Dave and Jane is that I hope that my Kate, when she is Katie's age, is that's my role model. She's my role model for my daughter. So not only has he been an outstanding businessman and public servant and going to have interesting insights on the Fed, but he's also a great family man with a powerhouse of a wife and a powerhouse of a daughter. So here's Dave Dennis to talk stuff about that.
Susan, I wish I could can some of those comments and play them back to Jane when I get in trouble sometimes. That would be real helpful. I do appreciate the opportunity. Dean Hinton, I have to say, has done an incredible job with the WPB and with just the whole energy that he gets from this whole organization. Sid James, I appreciate the opportunity, and I can go down the whole list of Susan Hubbard, who's in here, and Harriet Giles, and certainly Christy Myers and Carol Warfield. But thanks for the opportunity, and I got to tell you, it is always a good day to be in Auburn, Alabama. There's nothing better than to come over and get refreshed and just feel good about it. You know, Susan, a lot of times if you're in charge of programs, you've been around Rotaries and other things, you don't always get an A program, so sometimes you have to settle for what you can. I get 2 tries today. It's like playing golf. I may get a mulligan, so I'll come back at 11. If I don't hit it right this time, I'll tee it up again at 11. Try to do it correctly, but need to say that I am no longer on the Federal Reserve Board, so my comments, nonetheless, are still my comments, not the Federal Reserve Board's comments. Anything I say in a past lifetime, when I was fortunate enough to be on the board, I had a $200 job, a $200 a month job at risk. I don't have that now, but I still have a deep and abiding loyalty to them, and it's a sense of I want to respect what they stand for because it is an incredible professional organization. I'm going to give you just a little background on the Federal Reserve. Jane Mann, who is a member of the WTB, her husband Phil is on the Atlanta Federal Reserve, eminently qualified to speak and say the same things I'm going to say, and probably from a banker's perspective, maybe in a different tone, in a different outlook. But I'm going to give comments from, if you will, at a 10,000 foot level, and then during the Q&A, if we want to get into specific questions, then we can do that. But I'm going to give just a broad brush comment about the Federal Reserve, what it does, what it's supposed to do, and try to keep you guys awake. I know a lot of students are here. I've got a niece, Melanie Hensel, here that will graduate next month, and we appreciate her coming, and my sister, who was just elected the 2009 president of the Bankers Class for Alabama, Ann Hensel. So I thank y'all for showing up and critiquing the family. Don't write me out the will just because I don't give a good speech. The Federal Reserve was enacted in 1913, and it came about based on the fact that in the roughly 20-year period prior to that, there were a lot of mini depressions, spikes in the economy, booms, busts, and the economy was it was like a Richter scale going up and down. Well, Congress decided to try to put in place some type of organization that would minimize the peaks and valleys, some type of organization that would at least prohibit or prevent, if you will, some of the train wrecks that could occur. I'll touch on Bear Stearns. John Manley, who is up here, who comes on after me, can give you an incredible inside view on the way the investment banking community works. He's with Smith Barney, and I got to tell you, one of the most respected TV analysts that you're going to find. But what the Fed what it was charged with doing was take out the high points and the low points and just give us a smooth ride. Well, sometimes that works, and there are a lot of bankers in here today. And this is a broad brush comment, so please take it from that perspective. The Fed is a private organization. The people that work there, they're not accorded civil service protection. They're private citizens. They're private employees. They get promoted. They get fired. They get, in fact, they get critiqued very significantly. All the employees undergo some type of audit every year, and there really is no margin of error. But the major functions of the Fed, you've got fiscal policy and monetary policy. And fiscal policy would be certainly what Congress does, enacting laws, spending money. Monetary policy would be generally the Fed's charge in that it tries to either adjust money supply or look at discount windows, look at discount rates, and try to determine what needs to happen in the economy. Does it need to be cooled off a little bit? Does it need to be jump-started, which is the environment we're in right now? What really needs to happen to it? And it typically is done with branch banks that are scattered around the country. And you've got a lot of people that at my level, I'm a contractor. You've got other people, the New Orleans board when I was on there. Of that 7-member board, there was a man from Dubai that was head of Dow Chemicals, Mideast region. There was a man with McCormick Food, Zatarans, that lived in London. But it's scattered around, and we were fortunate to be part of that. But still, nonetheless, there's a sense of grassroots economics, grassroots business, if you will. And if you look at the structure of the Fed, there's 7 board of governors, and you hear about the FOMC, who actually makes the decisions, who actually communicates an interest or a discount window adjustment. That's a 7-member board. Of the 7 board of governor members, those 7 are presidential appointees, 14-year appointments. The chairman, currently Ben Bernanke, Chairman Bernanke, that's a presidential prerogative. In addition, there are 5 other members, and it's a group that the New York Fed president is always on that board, and 4 others rotate in and out. So there's a 12-member board, 7 board of governors. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes of boring things, and we're going to talk and have some fun with it. The questions come up about Chairman Greenspan versus Chairman Bernanke. I was asked to touch on that. Alan Greenspan came in 1987, and within a few weeks, you saw Black Monday and Black Friday. dealing with the October 1987 meltdown of the stock market. He had to hit the ground, had to make quick adjustments. He actually was in flight when the actual concern really became quite visible. He was fun to work with, intuitive, instinctive. Jane and I have heard him play a saxophone, a clarinet, stayed up late nights discussing things, perhaps over adult beverages later, and he's really a fun guy to be around. Comparing him to Chairman Bernanke, who is a bit more academic, though he's eminently qualified to be there. And he is, by golly, he's being tested by fire right now, and I think you're going to see the proofs in the pudding. He's going to come out in pretty good shape. We had a chance to have dinner with him in December for a few hours, and I've spent a good bit of time with him. He gets it. He understands it. And for those that are concerned, doesn't really get it, he gets it. And if he doesn't get it, folks like John Manley will quietly say on television, perhaps these things need to happen. And the Fed is not driven by Wall Street. Many people think it is. It clearly makes decisions based on what needs to happen, what really should happen within the economic environment. And to that end, it has been a pleasure to work with them and be with them. A lot of things going on. I mentioned fiscal policy, monetary policy. In addition to the monetary policy, the Fed will look at, is the economy going in what direction? We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but other things it does, it'll clear checks. Many of you bankers in here, the check clearing process, checks are diminishing at a rate of 7 to 8% per year. So check volume is decreasing, electronic transfers, electronic debit cards, credit cards. Most people are obviously evolving into that arena. So it's checks, for our generation, they'll never go away, and likely they will not go away for many, many years. Fortunately for me, because I've had cards that the ATM machines would take and not give back to me, so I don't know how that works. But the Fed is handling a goodly part of that. Check 21, that's an interesting arena that bankers are dealing with. It almost lets you create money in that you can write a check. It's the next generation of your wire transfers. But you could write a check, say in San Francisco, it's imaged, it's sent electronically to Boston if that's where it was going to be cashed, or that's where it was going to be opened up, if you will. That is a system that it was expected to take on maybe 3 to 5 million copies per night. In the course of about 2 years, it's grown to almost 50 million a night. So clearly that's where all of us know the electronic mode is moving. But imaging is pretty interesting. Had a guy that we had written a check to in our business, and he came back and said, I don't think you guys paid us. I said, well, I think we did. So we called up, check hadn't cleared yet, called the bank, got a quick image, pulled it up, put it on, and said, not only did you get the check, you endorsed it, here's who you gave it to, and this is who they endorsed it to, and suddenly his amnesia went away a little bit. So those things are pretty good. Another interesting thing you'll see, a lot of countries would buy U.S. dollars. If you're worried about the reserve currency, you see the euro going up, the dollar going down. There are a lot of dynamics that go into that. The dollar, I can, with 99.9% degree of certainty tell you, it will stay the reserve currency. The euro has made a run, and to some degree, and perhaps John will touch on this in the next session, in an economic environment, the Federal Reserve's main charge is to protect our economy. Friedman talks about a flat globe, a flat economic environment. When Columbus set sail in 1492, he was looking for a horizon to go over. Well, Friedman's not talking about that horizon. He's talking about the fact that you got a straight line from Taipei to Singapore to London to New York City to Auburn, Alabama. It is an instantaneous market. Virtual reality has it that what takes place, let's say, in Singapore, within a minute or two, you have the ability to know what takes place at any given time. Financial markets react to it. That's why, many times what you're seeing in, say, a Bear Stearns environment has to do with perception, among other things. A lot deeper story than that. But in reality, what's going on, everything happens so fast. It happens so quickly that you've got to be on call. If you're in the financial markets, you're on call 24/7, like it or not. You are. You either have a BlackBerry, you're on your computer, you're accessible. You've got to be able to react to whatever question comes up about how does the Federal Reserve actually lower rates, raise rates, etc. Well, the rate is a target rate. It's an implied rate. Chairman Bernanke's not going to call up Chase Manhattan or Auburn National and say, guys, why don't you bump it up a quarter, why don't you lower it a half? They do it with supply and demand. Economic students in here, oftentimes economics is a bit boring, but I'm going to tell you, everything you do deals with supply and demand, just about everything you do. As you look at the money supply in the country, if the economy is too hot and they want to cool it down, what does the Federal Reserve do? They'll go into the open market and buy bonds and pull them out. Reduce supply. Pull them out. Hopefully implied rates will go up. Interest rates go up. People will calm down a little bit. In the environment we're in right now, conversely, it will sell bonds into the open market. You hear them talking about, well, the money supply, M1 goes up, M2, M3, any of you that are students of that, you'll see money supplies oscillate back and forth. Well, in this environment, liquidity is a concern. So what is the Federal Reserve's main goal? Put money in the market, make it a liquid market, put money in there so that you can enhance what's going on. And it is strictly supply and demand. They put more money in, the supply is stronger, just like oil prices. If we've got a constricted supply, prices go up. If inventories are much larger, then hopefully prices will diminish somewhat. So that's what really the Fed does in the supply and demand mode with bonds in the open market, free open market committee. That's what it's doing. And John, that's an elementary comment, but that in reality, that is indeed what happens. It's strictly a supply and demand situation. I wondered, sitting in calculus classes here, what all those parabolas and what all the different design graphs were for. I didn't use any of that for 20 years. And then I sat in the Fed meeting and I'm looking at the graphs, and it's not these eco graphs with straight lines, supply and demand with a 45-degree angle. You've got tipping points, you've got a lot of points within yield curves that may tip up, tip down. You may reach a point and it has a bubble in it. And you figure out, by golly, there are a lot of things that affect economics. And it can get to be actually a little bit exciting if you're a little bit demented and really like economics. You have to be really demented to want to sit down with economics and enjoy it. So we leave that to the Board of Governors, the people that really deal with it. But I cannot emphasize to you what a good organization that is. It is professional people. They have zero margin of error. They don't get a second speech like I do today. They have one shot, one time, and it's interesting when someone of the Board of Governors level, and many of them have been in our house, Board of Governors level, or perhaps even the president of an Atlanta Fed or a New York Fed, when they speak, they will generally, in this instance, there will be reporters sitting in the back, sitting on their laptops, online, really generating whatever that person is saying, putting it into the market system. Well, normally they will pre-release their speech so that they have, in many instances, you could have a comma splice as you're delivering or have the wrong inflection and someone could take it incorrectly. So generally those speeches are pre-released and the comments, with the exception of an interest rate differential, those comments are put out onto the airwaves so that there is no misconception. We talked a little about Hurricane Katrina. The New Orleans Fed, at the time of Hurricane Katrina, the New Orleans Fed is positioned about 3 blocks from the Superdome, and whatever you saw there was real. What we saw on the coast of Mississippi was very real, and I can assure you it was something that we heard earlier about philanthropic people. The faith-based people that came down to Mississippi and Louisiana, they're still there. There's about 3,000 faith-based volunteers in Mississippi right now helping people. And I'm going to tell you, it's real, it's fun, it's intriguing, but the sense of how you deal with a disaster, and I think that the country learned a lot from Katrina. Electricity's gone, your ATMs are down, so cash is king. I cashed some checks a couple of days prior to Katrina so that we would have cash. I've got a friend that my sister Ann knows, Jim Johnson in Atmore, Alabama, I grew up with. He was my roommate up here. I called him a day or two, I got through and said, can you gather some cash and get it here? Because people were paying in cash. The IRS said, take 2 or 3 weeks, pay however you can, because no bank's going to cash any checks. You got to pay people however you got to pay them. And candidly, that is how it worked. And then you try to balance out the best you can on your FICA deposits and other things down the road. But it taught us that in a crisis, you need to be a bit prepared, and we perhaps were a little underprepared. Many people were, but enough of all the background. What my charge today was talk about the Federal Reserve and its impact on your economy, on your personal economy. Rates go down, if you're fortunate enough and have been disciplined enough to save money, rates go down, obviously that's going to hurt you a little bit. Rates go up, it's going to help. And recall a letter that Vice President Cheney sent not too long after 9/11. And he said, you know, I've got, not suggesting what takes place, but here's a letter from a guy, World War II veteran. He says, I have my savings bonds, I've done war bonds, savings bonds, I bought a house, a paper house, I had money in the bank as a savings account. I needed about $1,200 Social Security, which I get, about $1,200 interest to balance out my budget. Social Security's fine, my interest has gone from $1,200 per month down to approximately $600. I need help. No comment other than, please help him. And the Fed looks at how do you sustain low inflation, how do you sustain high employment, and how do you meld the two together to maintain a good, vibrant economy. The real question on what's going on now, what is taking place, what has people concerned, what has people generating a lot of anxiety, which, you know, it's hard not to have it with reading headlines. What you saw with Bear Stearns 4 weeks ago, generally, and again, this is a broad brush type comment, it's liquidity versus solvency. Liquidity versus solvency. You can be solvent. You can have a great balance statement. You can have an income statement, a balance statement, all the things that say, you know, gosh, we're making plenty of money. We're in great shape. Good for us. But you turn around, you don't have any money in the bank. And as you look at a Bear Stearns environment, their meltdown didn't have a lot to do with their balance sheet. It had to do with liquidity and, again, a lot of other things, too. But clearly, what happened to them, people lost confidence in them. And you're looking at an 80-year-old icon of a firm that in the course of just a couple of months, their stock goes from, in round numbers, 150 to 70 to 50. And even in the course of the last week before their true meltdown on that Friday, their stock's at 50 the day before. It's at 2 that next afternoon. What causes that? There are a lot of people in this room that are more in tune with that. Susan certainly was sending out a lot of information months ago prior to this, suggesting that there are some concerns. There are a lot of interesting vehicles for investment, the SIVs that people get into, derivatives. Susan tries to keep us up to date on a lot of things. She sent a book with Genius Spells, which dealt with derivatives, and I can candidly tell you, I'm not smart enough to understand derivatives, Susan, and I know most conservatives. I don't think anybody is either, but the book that she sent with Genius Spells dealt with the MIT guys that put together a lot of mathematical models, a lot of just stimulated models on what takes place in this environment and what did take place. Well, when things fall into place and programmed like they should, you can generally project, you can guess. But when perception of people comes into play, when anxiety comes into play, when a human factor comes into play, you can throw your computer models away. You can throw your projections away, because the mind sync of people says, you know, I've got this nest egg. What do I do to protect it? And to that degree, that you cannot program into the stock market. That you cannot really anticipate what takes place. So, what really would help, I think, on the Wall Street arena is people maintaining the perception that it's solid, which to a degree is why the Fed came in. And you know, when you really get down to it, what Bear Stearns was dealing with was what is taking place here, what is at risk. In our state of Mississippi, I've talked to our state treasurer and talked to Treasurer Kay Ivey. If you like it then, I'm sure Alabama's in the same situation. Bear Stearns had creditors and they had debtors. Mississippi happened to be a creditor to Bear Stearns, had bonds in there, had investments that were with Bear Stearns. Well, if Bear Stearns melts down, there goes a state portfolio of, let's say, $2 billion in our instance. That can't take place. It just fundamentally couldn't take place. So the risk that the Fed had to look at, and this was an overnight decision, the risk the Fed had to look at was the risk of not acting in the Bear Stearns arena. Was that risk greater than not acting? And clearly that was the case. I mean, most of them, but I'm going to tell you, they had to get in, and that probably kept some dominoes from moving back and forward. Liquidity, solvency, and kids that are in here from economics, that is what you got to deal with. You got to make sure you physically have money. You have to have money in your checking account. Even if you made money and you're going to pay tax April 18th, if you don't have money, then technically you've got to make some cash flow adjustments. That's what many of the investment bankers were looking at. They made investments that were not regulated to a large degree. Now, their stocks, their bonds, the SEC dealt with those. But many of the investments they made, it's like going out here on Jordan-Hare Stadium and playing a ball game without referees throwing flags if somebody was out of line. Most of what you saw in the investment banking arena, that was the case. They had rules, but they had a wide range of operating to work with. And to that end, I think you have to look at how people gauge their sense of business. And it's just a case of if you got a downside risk in not acting, you could be in trouble. And that's the Fed is trying to do that. They are very much on top of it. Interesting deal that Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson advanced from the Bush administration last Monday. John and I talked a little about this last night. Regulating the investment banking community. The Federal Reserve, I got to tell you, I have a hard time believing they asked for that challenge. I have a very hard time thinking they would enjoy it, but somebody's going to have to drill into it and see where your investments are. Are they clearly where they need to be? And that's what the Fed has been asked to do, and they're going to do what they can with it. Now it's going to move through Congress. It's got to a degree, have to get Senate and House approval, and then Bush clearly would sign it if he's still in office at that point in time. But it's an interesting dilemma. That's been a totally unregulated field, and it has grown exponentially. What the Fed was charged with early on was regulating banks and overseeing different types of money vehicles. Investment bankers pretty much had a clear field to operate in, and that has moderated. So I think that's probably a good thing. The election, what does that do to us? Don't know. That's up for grabs. What will it really do in terms of how we're going to look at investment communities, how we're going to look at taxes? I'll let each of you make your own decisions on that, but clearly the business community has a stake in what takes place in November. And I think you'll see the business community express its general thoughts. How does the Fed have an impact on the economy? Everywhere you turn. Payment systems, ACHs, electronic transfers, everything you deal with within the banking system, the Federal Reserve has a finger on it, and I think a good clean finger. And I've seen them from many perspectives. Got a banker friend sitting back here. I won't call him by name, but whoever's sitting next to Charles Peak, if they'd raise their hand, that would be great. He asked me last night, he said, why do bankers wear dark blue suits? And the answer was, may I tell them, that perhaps when they get scared, they have concerns that may show up. And bankers have had, they relied on the business community to give them a private sector approach to life. And it's a tough sell. And we rely on the information we get for our sense of security. That's what the bankers rely on. That's what the Federal Reserve relies on. It relies on anecdotal information from its branches, from its directors, from you sitting down and physically talking to them. And I think it's an intriguing environment, and I have to tell you, I think the Fed has done a great job. If you go back to 1980, when the Latin states were defaulting on loans, Mexico and several other Latin countries, the Fed stepped in and they took and extended out the write-offs. That's what likely you will see on these investment bankers. If they had to write everything down, they're all going to implode and perhaps fall like dominoes. That's not going to happen. Trust me, that will not happen. It cannot happen. And the Fed being put in this situation will, this is again an opinion, I firmly believe will take it and stretch it and make it a little better situation. I would just close with a couple of comments and then open up for Q&A. Federal Reserve has been an incredible opportunity for us personally. It's been a great organization in terms of trying to maintain the peaks and valleys. Nobody can do it flawlessly. Those guys are human. There have been mistakes. There have been opportunities that were missed. Perhaps Rates were lowered one or too many times in certain instances. There's a case to be made that in 1999 and 2000, maybe they didn't lower them quick enough, maybe they lowered them too much after 9/11. You can always second guess a Monday morning quarterback what they're doing. But at the end of the day, what they're doing is taking a market, trying to level it out, trying to maintain the security in the sense of some type of an environment that people can work with, that people can deal with, and that they can go to bed at night and say, guys, this is a pretty secure system, and I think it's an arena that we're all going to operate safely in. But to that end, I will close. It's usually better with a Q&A, so I'm going to open up for that. If anyone has questions, if I'm permitted to, I'll drill down as deep as I can on the subject matter, and if not, I'll let you decide if I don't know the answer. So you can read through that pretty easily, I think. So I would open up for questions. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think of Secretary Paulson's approach to?
Well, what I was saying earlier, personally, I think it's probably a good thing because as the investment banking community, as the Bear Stearns, Goldman Sachs exploded over the course of the last 15 to 20 years, they've done it with an electronic mode in that you can invest quicker in an electronic environment. What we did not have 25 years ago, they have now. And many of the investment vehicles that people are using, if you look at derivatives and other things, how quickly can things implode? How quickly can they change? How quickly can they move? There needs to be a ground, I think there needs to be, for a sense of security and stability in the country, there needs to be some type of parameter that's set. Now, do they want to get in and look at every line item? Let's hope not. But I think it's a good first start, whether it gets through Congress. Jane and I were with Federal Reserve people Thursday night and Friday night. I'm off the board, but we're still very much in touch with them. They don't know if it's going to get through Congress. It does. I think it will have some different complexion as Secretary Paulson has suggested, but I do think there's a case to be made that something needs to be put in place to stabilize it. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it would be possible, perhaps, since the Fed is backing out Bear Stearns, that perhaps later on when times are better, that the taxpayers would benefit from profits later on? So,
The question was, if the Fed is bailing out Bear Stearns, is there any sense that perhaps taxpayers could benefit from the profits later? That's going to be an issue I'd have to leave to Congress. I don't know that answer. I'm not certain if, in this instance, it had to happen, but day-to-day bailing out, there's no safety net under our company. If I can't make payroll on Thursday, we're in trouble. And we lose our house, we lose all of our investments in 30 years of work. That ain't going to happen either. But I can tell you that's going to be an issue that, as Congress deals with it, they're going to be the ones that have to determine that. I can't answer it. I would rather think what will happen, there will be such a regulatory environment, they'll stretch out their losses. I cannot answer that one. I would suggest calling Senator Shelby perhaps and see what he thinks about it. He is chairman of the banking committee, so he would probably have a better sense than anyone on it. Yes, sir.
Was it really a bailout of Bear Stearns, or is it a bailout of the financial system?
I think it was a bailout of the financial system, period. Bear Stearns happened to be the one that was at the focal point at that point in time. But if they go, then, this is a Friday afternoon or Friday during the day that all of this is taking place. If you have a whole weekend for people to generate thoughts and generate anxiety, which I mentioned earlier, that could have become a domino in such a 1 or 2 day period. It may have been over in 2 days. You could have had several bank failures. You could have had people running into banks. And a typical bank, I'm not going to talk in terms of investment houses, but a typical bank has a reserve ratio would have to maintain deposits, to have a case of it. If we all decide we want to go draw our demand deposits out of the bank, they have to have that capacity to be able to deliver. The investment houses, they do, but as you know, they are generally not guaranteed by FDIC or any other type of insurance. And in reality, if you've got a $1 billion portfolio, $100,000, all that's going to do is make you mad. And I think it clearly was a case of you stabilize the financial market. be my guess. Susan?
Speaking to that afternoon, you mentioned that there are 7 people on the board of governors, but right now there are not 7 because Christopher Dodd, in playing politics, is holding up 2 appointments. So when you discuss what could have happened because of the quorum requirements, if one of those 5 had been in an accident, in a coma, or whatever, because we've got politics being played in a very treacherous situation right now that is endangering, I think, the system. So.
Susan's question of the 7 Board of Governors I mentioned, of the 12-member FOMC, 7 are Board of Governors members. A quorum requires 5 Board of Governors. But currently there are 5 Board of Governors, and without being political, I would just say the Senate is not approving any advancements. It's much like a Supreme Court justice or circuit, 5th Circuit, 8th Circuit judge. The Senate is holding up generally what I consider to be decent prospects to go on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. There are 5 in play now. In order for the Fed to act, last week or 3 weeks ago with Bear Stearns, to act at any point in time, 5 have to be there, 5 have to vote. The board will vote as a whole, but the quorum has as a core the 5 Board of Governors as part of that 12-member core. There are 5. One of them gets sick, one of them's in an accident, one of them can't get there. That's a big. And Senator Dodd is pretty inquisitive about that at this point. I'll give you an interesting thing. The Fed, oddly enough, has been as non-political as you can come up with. Alice Rivlin, that served on Clinton's cabinet, she had a certain perspective in life. She immediately came to the middle within a few weeks of being on that board. You get a right-winger that happens to be over here, if they go on that board, they have no choice but to govern from the middle. And you can have certain latitude with a 5 or 10% margin, but they've got to govern straight down the middle within reason. And the political aspects of it, the country has too much at risk. That's not a political question. It's not any geographical divide. It is strictly a question of how the country moves forward. And if we maintain the 5 there, that becomes a little dicey. So that needs to be addressed, and hopefully it will be at some point in the future.
I have been told we have to pull the plug on this. There are a lot of students wanting to come in, so if you want to maintain your seat, you may want to stay seated. But at the same time, I'm supposed to tell you that the treasurers, all day long, the treasurer, Kay Ivey, has set up a table in the rotunda so that you can check if you have any unclaimed property with the state, and the deputy